Your country needs you. Across Britain in 1914, those four words stare down from walls, tram stops, railway stations, and newspaper kiosks. The posters show a stern face with piercing eyes, an enormous walrus moustache, and a finger pointing directly outward as if accusing every man who passes beneath it. And for many young men, the experience of seeing it feels strangely personal. The moustached soldier on the poster rapidly becomes one of the most recognizable military figures in the world. Herbert Kitchener, the soldier tasked with raising Britain's wartime army during the opening months of World War I. Newspapers soon begin to call these volunteers Kitchener's Army, and within months, hundreds of thousands of men answer the call. Yet to understand the man behind the commanding image, we must travel far west, across the sea, and many decades into the past from the present day. Imagine the map of Britain slowly sliding away beneath us as we cross the Irish Sea. The calendar rewinds year by year until it settles on 1850. We arrive on the Atlantic edge of County Kerry in Ireland, where wind rolls across the fields and the memory of catastrophe still lingers in the soil. The Great Famine is only just ending, yet its consequences remain painfully visible through the countryside. Fields lie uneven where potato crops once failed, abandoned cottages slowly collapsing into the grass, and entire families have vanished through emigration or death. The countryside appears quiet, but it carries a deep memory of hardship and loss. In the small village of Ballylongford, turf smoke drifts above stone cottages where Atlantic winds push salt air across the surrounding farmland. At first glance, the landscape seems peaceful, yet the region is still adjusting to the upheaval that reshaped land ownership and rural life. Just outside of Ballylongford, in a residence called Gunsborough Villa, a newborn child lies quietly in a wooden cradle while adults nearby discuss land, politics, and the fragile future of the region. The child receives the name Horatio Herbert Kitchener. His father, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Horatio Kitchener, belongs to the class of landowners who purchased Irish estates during the turbulent years around the famine. These purchases became possible through legislation known as the Encumbered Estates Act, which allowed financially ruined estates to be sold rapidly to buyers who possessed necessary capital. For struggling Irish tenant farmers, the consequences of those transactions could feel devastating and deeply unfair. Farms cultivated by the same families for generations suddenly passed into new ownership through auctions conducted in distant towns. In rural conversations, one word carried particular bitterness when describing the new landlords who arrived during this period, most from England. That word was grabber. The Kitchener family, therefore, lived within a landscape shaped by resentment, economic upheaval, and social distance. Their comfortable house stood among the surrounding fields, yet the community around them never fully accepted their presence. Young Herbert Kitchener grew up inside that uneasy atmosphere, surrounded by authority, yet rarely embraced by the wider neighbourhood. The tension between belonging and separation quietly shaped the emotional environment of his childhood. Life inside Gunsborough Villa followed routines that felt distinctly English rather than Irish. Herbert's father believed strongly in discipline, order, and the stoic endurance expected from the officers serving the British Empire. Meals were formal occasions where conversation rarely wandered into humour or warmth. Children were expected to sit properly, speak clearly when addressed, and demonstrate the quiet self-control admired by Victorian families. These habits gradually moulded Herbert's personality into something observers later described as reserved, controlled, and intimidatingly silent. Those traits did not encourage easy friendships among children of a similar age. Several relatives of the young Herbert later remembered he preferred solitary pursuits rather than lively games or noise gatherings. He enjoyed examining mechanical objects, studying maps, and wandering around the surrounding countryside while observing the land with a quiet curiosity. The fields of County Kerry became an informal classroom where the boy absorbed lessons from the landscape itself. Ruined cottages stood beside working farms, reminders of the catastrophe that had devastated the region only a few years earlier. Even a child could sense that the countryside carried memories older than his own lifetime. Instead of a carefree innocence, the environment encouraged observation, reflection, and patience. As the years passed, the Kitchener family eventually left Ireland, seeking educational opportunities elsewhere in Europe. The journey carried the young Herbert away from the windswept fields of Kerry towards schools in France and Switzerland. There he developed a growing interest in engineering and technical study, subjects that suited his methodical temperament remarkably well. Engineering demanded precision, careful calculation, and the ability to visualize landscapes as systems of measurement and structure. Herbert discovered these skills came naturally to him. Surveying terrain, mapping routes, and calculating distances provided intellectual challenges that rewarded patience and concentration. Those abilities soon opened a clear pathway toward a professional military career. In the 1870s, Kitchener joined the Royal Engineers, one of the most technically specialised branches of the British Army. The Corps combined military discipline with the scientific expertise, sending officers across the empire to build fortifications, map unfamiliar territories, and establish the logistical infrastructure that allowed armies to operate far from home. For a young officer who preferred structure and organisation, this role provided an ideal fit. Our journey through time now carries us eastward across the Mediterranean towards the complex political landscape of the Middle East. Kitchener became involved in a surveying work connected with the Palestine Exploration Fund, an organisation dedicated to mapping and studying the geography of what is known as the Holy Land. The surveys produced remarkably detailed maps that fascinated scholars, but they also attracted the attention of military planners through Europe. Working under difficult conditions hardened Kitchener's already disciplined personality. He demanded accuracy from everyone assisting him, and rarely tolerated mistakes. Observers frequently remarked he spoke very little, yet expected absolute commitment from the people around him. The quiet young officer from Kerry gradually developed a reputation for efficiency and relentless determination. By the 1880s, Kitchener found himself involved in British operations within Sudan, a region in Africa where imperial rivalry and local resistance created one of the most dramatic conflicts of the late 19th century. A powerful Islamic movement known as the Mahdist Uprising, that's Mahdist, uprising, challenged Egyptian and British authority across the region. The movement was led by Muhammad Ahmad, a charismatic religious leader who inspired enormous loyalty among his followers. In 1885, Mahdist forces captured the city of Khartoum, defeating a British garrison commanded by Charles George Gordon. News of Gordon's death shocked Britain and humiliated the imperial government. The fall of Khartoum became one of the most controversial military disasters of the era, and public opinion demanded revenge. After this disaster, Herbert Kitchener left, but then, more than a decade later, Herbert Kitchener returned to Sudan with a carefully planned campaign designed to restore British control. Rather than relying on heroic charges or dramatic battlefield gestures, he approached the conflict as a logistical challenge. Engineers built railways across the desert so supplies and troops could move rapidly along the Nile Valley. Steamships patrolled the river while telegraph lines connected distant outposts with remarkable efficiency. Kitchener believed that modern warfare depended less on individual bravery than on organization and preparation. His strategy transformed the campaign into a methodical advance supported by technology and careful planning. The decisive confrontation eventually arrived in 1898 at the Battle of Omdurman. Thousands of maddest warriors charged towards British lines with the extraordinary courage and determination. Waiting for them stood disciplined soldiers equipped with rifles, artillery, and the devastating firepower of the Maxim gun. The clash revealed the brutal imbalance created by modern industrial warfare. When the battle ended, the maddest army lay shattered across the desert plain. Victory at Omdurman turned Herbert Kitchener into a national hero. Newspapers celebrated him as the soldier who avenged Gordon and restored British authority along the Nile. By the beginning of the 20th century, his reputation for discipline, organization, and determination had made him one of the most famous soldiers in the world. We now move forward again toward the summer of 1914, where we started this episode. Europe drifts steadily toward catastrophe as political tensions erupt into World War I. Britain suddenly faces the urgent challenge of raising a massive army capable of fighting on the continent. Many politicians believe the war will end quickly, but Kitchener, as it turns out correctly, disagrees. Drawing upon decades of military experience, he predicts the conflict may last several years. He was right about that, and require millions of soldiers, and he was also right about that. He therefore calls for the creation of entirely new volunteer armies to prepare Britain for a prolonged struggle. At this moment, the famous recruitment poster finally appears. Illustrator Alfred Leete originally created the image for a magazine cover, yet once war begins, the drawing changes slightly and spreads rapidly across Britain. Railway platforms, newspaper offices, and shop windows display the stern figure pointing outward from the page. Leete sharpens the finger, tightens the expression, and deepens the gaze until the image seems almost confrontational. Many young men later admit that the poster feels less like an advertising and more like a direct command delivered from the wall itself. Within months, hundreds of thousands of volunteers step forward to join what the newspapers proudly call Kitchener's army. The soldier from County Kerry has become the human symbol of Britain's wartime mobilisation. Yet fate will not allow him to see how the enormous conflict eventually ends. In June 1916, Kitchener boards the cruiser HMS Hampshire for a diplomatic mission to Russia, intended to strengthen the wartime alliance. The ship sails north of Scotland through rough seas and heavy winds. Darkness falls as the vessel navigates dangerous waters scattered with German naval mines. Suddenly, an explosion tears through the hull after the cruiser strikes one of those hidden weapons. Water floods the ship with terrifying speed, and within minutes, the vessel disappears beneath the freezing waves of the North Sea. The man whose image summoned millions of volunteers vanishes beneath the sea without a grave and without a trace. That man, from just outside Ballylongford in County Kerry, disappears. Yet his moustached face and pointing finger remains fixed as history's most famous. Even today, that poster continues to deliver the same silent command. Your country needs you.